about to follow a ton of face drawing YouTube videos to see how much I improve my art, so let's begin the tutorials. I'm doing this challenge to try and find all the best techniques from various artists that help me the most so I can share them with you. And by the way, this is only the first of 20 tutorials I'll be following in this video. If I can successfully complete all 20, then hopefully I'll be able to see a significant improvement in my face drawing ability. I'm going to be honest though, this challenge did not go as I expected. So that's it for this first tutorial, 19 more to go. This is a tutorial by Chomang Drawing and it's just so chill. Some nice piano music playing in the background with them drawing and giving some really helpful advice. At the beginning of the video it says a guideline is just a guideline, and that's so true. In the past I've spent tons of time trying to get perfect guidelines, but the human face isn't perfect, so having some slight imperfections adds depth to it. Even though this video is chill, they're actually drawing really quickly. They do all 3 faces in just 13 minutes real time. I think it's because of how efficient they are with their strokes. So even though they aren't actually moving that fast, they get a lot done quickly with clean lines. I flipped the canvas for the first time, and although you can't see all the times I flipped the canvas in the time lapse, I know this is something I'm going to be doing a lot during this challenge, as I'm constantly checking my proportions. So as I finish up this first one, I would say I did an okay job at this one, but the face looks too masculine and defined, as well as the proportions in the 2 side views being a lot worse than the front view. While I'm not super happy with how these look, all it means is that there's lots of areas for me to improve on during this challenge. Now I have a Proko tutorial, and as you'd expect, it's packed full of information. He talks about how to create accurate proportions through using different ways to measure things that are relational to each other. He explains how you can use straight and horizontal lines to find where things match up. You could also look at their angles or use a unit of measurement for everything, like a head unit, to keep things in relation all across the page. It can be easier to get accurate proportions when just using straight lines, because they're simpler to control, as you're only thinking about the placement and angle when drawing with them. On top of this, thinking about the negative shapes while you're drawing and working from big to small or other methods to keep your proportions in check. I was trying to apply as many of these tips as I could while drawing this, and I feel I did a pretty decent job at it. I'm onto a tutorial by SamDoesArts next, and he's starting out with some drawings of the skull. My skull anatomy knowledge is basically non-existent, so it's good that I have his drawings as some reference to work with. Even though you can see I haven't drawn many skulls before, the last couple got a bit better, but now I'm onto some quick sketches of the face. He draws them very loosely, exaggerating some of the features, and he shows how he's self-correcting as he goes by looking at the things he likes and doesn't like, then makes changes accordingly. So I try to do the same, and I think that it's definitely helping. After the first 6 faces, something clicks and they start looking a lot better as I work on building the characters in 3D, instead of trying to position the body parts. I'm also focusing on being intentional with my brush strokes and decision making. So I finish up the last few, and I'm onto a tutorial by Drawing Jones. He uses a few different ways of measuring the features from what I'm used to, which work quite nicely, but what I really liked about this one was how clearly we were defining the form and structure of the face, which made it look 3D. He talks about the rhythms of the face, which is a concept I've also heard on Proko, and is something I never think about, so that could be an area for me to learn some more on. This one looks really good overall now, so I'm following the next one while trying to avoid the mistakes they show in the video, and this looks super nice for some reason. I just follow all the tips and it gets the face to look really good. I was scared at the beginning that using an oval for the head shape would mess me up, but it worked really well. Another Proko tutorial, this time the instructor is explaining his hybrid method for blocking in the face, by combining visual and structural approaches, whatever that means. I realised while doing this I'm getting better at using my whole arm to draw rather than just my wrist, and I think it's because I'm seeing these really good traditional artists use their whole arm, so I've just been instinctively copying it, and it's helping a lot. I've been using the 6B pencil in Procreate as well for all these drawings. So he's using some big words like external, auditory meatus and zygomatic arch, but I'm just trying to make it look 3D. I think I'm doing a pretty good job at it. Now I'm finishing it up and I'm really happy with how this is looking. And it felt like kind of a waste to leave such a good base and just go on to the next one, so I added some shadows to it as well for fun, which just made it even better. This next one is a beginner proportions explanation, and now I've heard these same guidelines a few times over, I think they're starting to get more natural in my art. It looks pretty good, and I also think I'm getting better at sizing the head, which is something I was struggling with a lot before. I still didn't get it the first time on this one, but I did manage to make it more decent. This next one I'm using the Loomis method and drawing the head at an angle, which is exactly what I need to work on. I get the proportions mostly right in the initial guidelines, which makes everything else easier. His face might have been a little too square, and it's a bit more rounded in the reference, but overall it's pretty solid. Literally as well, because I felt in this one I did a better job at getting the forms of the face to show in 3 dimensions, like I did in the Proko video before. Aside from that, as I went from the big shapes to the smaller shapes, it started looking a lot better, and adding the wrinkles made it more realistic. I did struggle a bit though on getting the wrinkles around his eye to not look like massive eyelashes. I don't want to say too much, but I'm really pleased with the progress I've made so far. far. This next one is by an art school or something, so it's very technical and giving a lot of anatomy. It doesn't go too in detail with the proportions, and I did make my skull a bit flat. I tried to fix it up a bit, but I just decided to try again with the next one. This time we spend some more time on the block out, getting the shapes right, which helps a lot. When I'm on to adding all the planes of the face, I'm making up a lot of them, but it still looks really cool like a 3D model, with all the planes visible. I did notice that the eyes were a bit too low and the proportions were off. I only saw this after I did all the planes though, so I just do some liquify at the end to try and fix it up. Then on the last one I'm going along with what they say, but I just don't quite get it right. I thought it was looking okay, but I had to keep on changing things and they ended up just looking a bit goofy. This next video goes in a completely different direction and doesn't even draw a single face the entire time. Instead, the focus is on visualizing forms in 3D and understanding the main proportions of the face, which you can simplify into boxes. So I draw the boxes with landmarks and cuts in and out. These boxes remind me of vending machines for some reason. I don't know if that's a good thing for what my head should be looking like, but I think most of these 3D forms look pretty reasonable. Next up is another of the front-on face proportions, but this one takes a very different approach and uses a lot of guidelines that I've never seen before. They're all easy to follow and it works well, so I'm not complaining. This one looks a lot better. So now I'm following a time-lapse of this person making a kind of realistic face. I spent quite a lot of time at the beginning of this one getting all the features looking clean and in the right place, because that was my main focus, and I was also hoping it would make the rendering later easier to do. So I did do that and it looks really good. And then they just go crazy with the rendering, getting all the crevices and details right. I copy it for the most part and still do all the rendering with the 6B pencil, and it turns out really nice. Alright, this next video he's explaining the Loomis method and getting me to work on constructing the head, as well as drawing cubes to get the shape of it right. The first couple weren't looking too good, but I just kept on going with it. I like the exercise of using 3D objects to try and draw heads, but I don't think it helped my proportions. Either way, the next part of the video is on anatomical structure, so I draw some skulls to work on that, which look okay. Then I'm on to the ratios of the face, and I'm just doing a ton of different stuff, drawing lots of different faces and different angles. I'm doing an Asaro head, real life faces, perspective faces, anime faces, box faces, stylized faces, and everything. I think it's just good for me to do a few of each, so after filling up the page and watching through the rest of the video while trying to apply all the tips, I'm now on to the next one, in which I get a 20-week drawing plan to do. So yeah, I'm not going to be doing all of that. Instead, I'll just go through the key parts of the plan and draw a few of each thing. So once again, I'm drawing even more boxes and cylinders to start this video off. I'm then progressing this by blocking in some facial features and more of a head structure into the box like I've done in some previous tutorials. I'm doing a few different things, working on drawing the facial features in isolation with their 3D volumes, as well as progressing up to some skulls and then a few full faces at the end, which just got better and better until the last one, which I was most happy with. And I think I managed to mostly mix the stylization with defined forms. This next one is another front-on proportions guide, just using all the same measurements. There's not much to say, it looks pretty good. On to the next one. I'm into the final few now. This next video is on combining anime and realism to create a stylized head. Apparently the key is just using proportions of a realistic head, then not defining all the subtle details. We're once again doing some Loomis method practice to work on this. I had fun drawing the character and getting his expression right, and although I had to do quite a bit of adjusting to get the perspective looking okay, I think I still did a better job than I would have done before with something like that when they're looking down. It's not perfect, but I like it a lot. So in this next one, the guy starts out by watching a video on face proportions so that he can teach it to me what he just learned from the Loomis method. And then randomly at some point in the video, he just gets on a bus to deliver a package or something. I don't even know what's happening. His art's good though, so I'm just going to work on copying that. He's going so quick through these drawings and the amount of cuts is a lot, which sometimes makes it hard to get a good reference, but it at least means he does a lot in the video, so I have a lot of reference to use. I think I'm getting better at making the jaw shape right and defining it better with straight, sharp lines. The inside features like the eyes especially and the nose sometimes is where I'm struggling the most. I made it a focus to get these right, and with some more effort on it, as well as trying to make sure of my perspective and placement by putting in something simple first, like just a top eyelid to get it right, made a huge difference. I'm spending a lot of time on these to try and get it right, and I found that using the shading in the early stages can also be a helpful tool for me to start thinking about the 3D forms early on in the block out. I kind of got into the flow of it, and the last one turns out the best, which I'm really happy with. Now another Draw Like a Sir tutorial, apart from this one, is a sequel to his last video, which he showed the Loomis method in, because apparently people didn't like using the Loomis method, so he had to make another one. I don't know. Okay, so he's basically saying that the problem with the Loomis method is that it makes all the faces the same. He's talking for pretty much the whole video and not really doing any drawing until right at the end, when he shows how to apply the Loomis method correctly to an anime face, so I'm just going to be copying that one and trying to get the perspective the same as it is in his. I think I did a good job and the proportions look lined up mostly. The eyes are kind of cool and the way the hair is blowing in the wind or something adds a nice touch to it. Overall, I'm really happy with this one. Now onto the final one, where the person is explaining their favourite way to get the proportions right for a portrait. They're using something called a proportional divider for measuring the proportions traditionally, which is just a device that lets them then measure the distance of two parts on a piece of paper, then it can scale up the same distance to what they can use on their canvas. It looks cool and like it would make it so much easier, but I'm just going to focus on drawing it and doing my own thing. They block out the general shape, then instead of drawing any of the features, they just block out the light and shadow shapes and go straight into painting. I like the approach and the drawing looks good, but it just doesn't really fit with the other ones, so forget it. The previous one is the final one. That's it for the challenge. I felt like this was really helpful overall.